Hello everybody, this is Arnold in my kitchen, back for chapter 3 of The Phantom Tollbooth. So, for folks who are just joining us, The Phantom Tollbooth is a story of a boy named Milo who is very bored with life. But one day he comes into his apartment and he sees this box. And he opens it up, and in the box is what's called a Phantom Tollbooth and a map to go on an amazing adventure. So he gets in his little car, takes his tokens to go through the toll booth, and yes, he is on an amazing adventure. And in chapter 3, it's Welcome to Dixonopolis. So Dixonopolis is the next place that Milo is going to on this adventure in the Phantom Toll Booth. "You must excuse my gruff conduct," the watchdog said, after they'd been driving for some time. "But you see, it's traditional for watchdogs to be ferocious." The watchdog is a dog, as you see, with a watch as part of its body that Milo met, and that helped him get out of the doldrums in chapter 2. Milo was so relieved to have escaped the doldrums that he assured the dog that he bore him no ill will, and in fact he was very grateful for his assistance. "Splendid," said the watchdog. "I'm very pleased. I'm sure we'll be great friends for the rest of the trip. You may call me Doc." That's a strange name for a dog who goes tick-tock, tick-tock all day long, said Milo. "Why do they call you?" "Don't say it," said the dog, and Milo could see a tear welling up in its eye. "I didn't mean to hurt your feelings," said Milo, not meaning to hurt his feelings. "That's all right," said the dog, getting a hold of himself. "It's an old story and a sad one, but I can tell it to you now. When my brother was born, the first pup in the family, my parents were overjoyed and immediately named him Tick in expectation of a sound they'd sure he'd make. Unwinding him, they discovered to their horror, instead of going tick, 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 he went tock, 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 tock. They rushed to the Hall of Records to change the name, but too late. It had already been officially inscribed, and nothing could be done. When I arrived, they were determined not to make the same mistake twice, and it seemed logical that all their children would make the same sound. So they named me Tock. Of course you know the rest. My brother's name Tick, he goes tock, 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 tock. I'm called Tock because I go tick, 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 tick. And both of us are forever burdened with the wrong names. My parents were so overwrought that they gave up having any more children and devoted their lives to do good work amongst the poor and hungry." "How did you become a watchdog?" injected Milo, hoping to change the subject, as Tock was sobbing quite loudly now. "That," he said, rubbing a paw in his eye, "is also traditional. My families have always been watchdogs, from father to son, almost since time began. You see," he continued, starting to feel better, "once there was no time at all, and people found it very inconvenient. They never knew whether they were eating lunch or dinner. They always were missing trains, so time was invented to help them keep track of the day and get to places they should. When they began to count all the time that was available, What with 60 seconds in a minute, and 60 minutes in an hour, and 24 hours in a day, and 365 days in a year, it seemed as if there was much more than could be used. If there's so much of it, it couldn't be very valuable, was the general opinion, and it soon fell into disrepute. People wasted it and gave it away. Then we were given the job of seeing that no one wasted it again. He said, sitting up proudly, "It's hard work, but a noble calling. For you see," and now he was standing on the seat, 1 foot to the windshield, shouting with his arms outstretched, "It is our most valuable possession, more precious than diamonds. It marches on, and tide wait for no man, and..." At that point in the speech, the car hit a bump in the road, and the watchdog collapsed in a heap on the front seat with the alarm ringing furiously. "Are you all right?" said Milo. "Oomph," grunted Doc. "Sorry to get carried away, but I think you get the point." As they drove along, Doc continued to explain the importance of time, quoting old philosophers and poets and illustrating each point with gestures that brought him perilously close to tumbling headlong from the speeding automobile. Before long, they saw in the distance the towers and the flags of Dictionopolis sparkling in the sunshine. And there they see the flags and the city of Dictionopolis. And in a few minutes they reached a great wall and stood at the gateway to the city. Roared a gentleman, clearing his throat and snapping to attention. "This is Dictionopolis, a happy kingdom advantageously located in the foothills of confusion and caressed by gentle breezes from the sea of knowledge. Today, by royal proclamation, is market day. Have you come to buy or sell?" And here's the man making the proclamation. "Have you come to buy or sell?" "I beg your pardon," said Milo. "Buy or sell," reported the gentleman impatiently. "Which is it? You must have come here for some reason." "Well, began Milo. "Come now. If you have a reason, you must at least have an explanation, or certainly an excuse," interrupted the gentleman. Milo shook his head. "Very serious, very serious," the gate man said, shaking his head also. "You can't get in without a reason." He thought for a moment, and then he continued. "Wait a minute. Maybe you have an old one you can use." He took a battered suitcase from the gatehouse and began to rummage busily through it, mumbling himself. No, that won't do. No. This is fine." And he cried triumphantly, holding up a small medallion on a chain. He dusted it off, and engraved on one side were the words, "Why not?" That's a good reason for almost anything. A bit used perhaps, but still quite serviceable. And with that he placed it around Milo's neck, pushed back the heavy iron gate, bowed low, and motioned them into the city. "I wonder what the market will be like," thought Milo, as they drove through the gate. But before there was time to answer, they had driven into an immense crowded square with long lines of stalls heaped with merchandise and decorated in gay-colored bunting. Overhead, a large banner proclaimed, "Welcome to the Word Mart." And from across the square, 5 very tall, thin gentlemen, regally dressed in silks and satins, plumed hats, and buckled shoes, rushed up to the car, stopped short, mopped 5 brows, caught 5 breaths, unrolled 5 parchments, and began talking in turn. And here's the 5 tall gentlemen that were starting to talk in turn. Gentlemen, salutations, welcome, good afternoon, hello. Milo nodded his head and went on, reading from their scrolls. By order of Azaz, the Underbridge, King of Dichinopolis, monarch of letters, emperor of phrases, sentences, and miscellaneous figures of speech, we offer you the hospitality of our kingdom, country, nation, state, commonwealth, realm, empire, palanate, principality. Do all these words mean the same thing, gasped Milo? Of course. Certainly. Precisely. Exactly. Yes, they replied in order. Well then, said Milo, not understanding why each one said the same thing in a slightly different way. Wouldn't it be simpler to use just one? It would certainly make more sense. Nonsense. Ridiculous. Fantastic. Absurd. Bosh. They chorused again and continued. We're not interested in making sense. It's not our job. Besides, explained the second, one word is as good as another, so why not use them all? Then, why don't you choose which one is right? Replied the third. Besides, sighed the fourth, if one is right, then 10 or 10 times is right. Obviously, you don't know who we are, sneered the fifth, and they presented themselves one by one as the Duke of Definition, the Master of Meaning, the Earl of Essence, the Count of Cognitation, the Undersecretary of Understanding. Milo acknowledged the introduction, and as Tot growled softly, the minister explained. We are King's advisors, in more formal terms as cabinet. And there is one of the members of the cabinet. Cabinet, recited the Duke. 1. A small private room or closet, case with drawers, etc. for keeping valuables or displaying curiosities. A council room for chief ministers. 2. A body of official advisors to chief executive of a nation. You see, continued the minister, bowing thankfully to the Duke, Dichinopolis is the place where all the words in the world come from. They're grown right here in our orchards. I didn't know words grew on trees, said Milo timidly. Where'd you think they grew? Shouted the Earl irritably. A small crowd began to gather to see the little boy who didn't know that letters grew on trees. I didn't know they grew at all, said Milo. Even more timidly, several people shook their heads sadly. Well, money doesn't grow on trees, does it? Demanded the Count. I heard not, said Milo. Then something must. Why not words? Explained the Undersecretary triumphantly. The crowd cheered his display of logic and continued about its business. To continue, continued the minister impatiently, once a week, by royal proclamation, the word market is held here in the great square, and people come from everywhere to buy words they need or trade in the words they haven't used. Our job, said the Count, is to see that all the words sold are proper ones, for it wouldn't do to sell someone a word that had no meaning or didn't exist at all. For instance, if you bought a word like gibberish, where would you use it? It would be difficult, thought Milo. But there were so many words that were difficult, he hardly knew any of them. But as we choose which ones to use, explained the Earl, as he walked toward the market stalls, for as long as they mean what they mean to mean, we don't care if they make sense or nonsense. Innocence or magnificence, added the Count. Reticence or common sense, added the Undersecretary. It seems simple enough, said Milo, trying to be polite. Easy as falling off a log, cried the Earl, falling off a log with a loud thump. And there's the Earl, fallen off a log.
Must you be so clumsy?
Shouted the Duke. All I said was, began the Earl, rubbing his head. We heard ya, said the minister angrily, and you'll have to find an expression that's less dangerous. The Earl dusted himself off as the others snickered audibly.
You see, cautioned the Count, you must pick your words very carefully and be sure to say just what you intend to say. And now we must leave to make preparations for the royal banquet.
You'll be there, of course, said the minister. But before Milo had a chance to say anything, they were rushing off across the square as fast as they had come. Enjoy yourself in the market, shouted back the undersecretary.
Market, replied the Duke, an open space or covered building in which...
And that was the last Milo heard as they disappeared into the crowd. I never knew words could be so confusing, Milo said to Tock as he bent down to scratch the dog's ear.
Only when you use a lot to say a little, answered Tock.
Milo thought this was the wisest thing he heard all day. Come, he shouted, let's see the market. It looks very interesting. And that is the end of chapter 3. And next week, we'll read chapter 4, Confusion in the Marketplace, in this place called Dictionopolis, where all the words comes from. And more about the adventures of Milo and Tock. Hope you'll join me then, and have a great week.